the idea of these popular and notable authors of the last century, the Huxley characters, the Orwell characters, these people, Ray Bradbury and the like, these people who've written some of the most popular and seminal books of the last century and more that persist, that are still popular, that are included throughout academia, that have been made into multiple Hollywood films or TV series and they keep being regurgitated and brought forth and reintroduced through society through when events happen such as the COVID fraud and such. The prominence of the likes of Orwell became a lot more popular, especially in the truther community, right? These ideas of 1984 and Animal Farm and all these things that suddenly became popular once again because the machine was being tyrannical and authoritarian and fascistic and socialist and communist. And so these books once again show up, these seminal books, these seemingly everlasting tomes that keep being reintroduced in society as, see, they told us, they warned us. Of course, my contention, similar to others who've looked into these things in the past and who have certainly done a lot more research on the topic into these authors and their histories and their family and the notable characters in the family lines and their beliefs and relations to the oligarchy or whatever it might be, where these people come from, what their belief systems are and such, and could they have been on some level in some way organized in their approach and pre-scripted in a way and related to the Tavistockian idea, the MI6, the CIA, these military industrial complex things that became the cultural industrial complex. And could it be that these authors and all of their relations, this secret sort of society group was organized well beforehand and around some sort of systemic or cultural reset, even, early 1900s, 1902 in particular was a specific year wherein a lot of our modern society and things were reset regionally and around the world. And then we had the world wars occur one after another, which destroyed a lot of young men and women and destroyed a lot of economies that were growing in other aspects of the world. That Western Empire, at the time in the earlier years of the 20th century, was the UK Empire still enforcing these things, and that power was transferred and transformed over into the United States Western Empire, which is simply a continuation of the same idea. These characters who were well off or working in the background or part of some secret family organization, perhaps the secret elite, the same people, the same parasites and predators that are constantly working in our reality, in our narrative and reality creation aspects of our society. What if they were simply part of a script, part of a plan to introduce and maintain and entrench and entrain certain ideas over a century? Introduce ideas that would be perpetuated, repeated through academia, through these popular novels that somehow just continue to be popular and impactful. These ideas that seem to introduce, the rebellious faction, the dissidents, the standing up against the man sort of idea, the exposure of, if we don't get if we're not aware of these machinations, if we don't put the right kind of people into politics, if we don't take care not to allow the technocrats and the fascists and the others to get into office and to take over, that these are the unfortunate outcomes that will happen and befall us. There will be the book burnings. There will be, these extreme events. There will be the technocratic takeover. There will be the, even the Hitler types that did seemingly happen in reality, but were certainly amplified by media and the winners of these wars after the fact, right? These evil and ultimate collations and compilations of the worst in humanity that the media and the Western narrative and academia, year upon year upon year, keeps reiterating into the public consciousness. Every year, a new film is made out of the Hollywood propaganda machine about these world wars and these dastardly things and the Holocaust and all these other ideas that every single year, right around Oscar time, they seem to release another film regarding these horrific events where masses and millions were killed, on and on and on. And lest we forget, right, every single year they have to keep reiterating these ideas. Why is that? Could it be that there is some sort of fiction involved? Could it be that there are some massive lies to these narratives that they have to keep repeating so we don't question, so that it's wrong to question, so that it is heretical, so that it is dangerous, so that it's insane and crazy to consider these conspiratorial notions in the first place? Could it be that there's so much fiction in these narratives and stories that they perpetuate that they have to keep repeating it all the time for that specific reason, so that it is wrong to even question these things? And all along, throughout the rest of the century, in good times and bad, in all throughout normal between war sort of things, even though there's never a time when there is no sort of war or conflict being created and manufactured and maintained somewhere by these same psychopathic entities and these sociopathic conglomerates and corporations and the various arms of the military and information and intelligence and cultural industrial complexes. It's there's never actual peacetime. There's the illusion of it, of course, especially in the West over the last century, post 1945. There's the illusion of the apparent abundance and prosperity and such, and the baby boom and all these things that were eventualities post war, and the narratives that were perpetuated through those, especially in those early years, in that first decade or so, where a lot of these authors were enshrined into academia. A lot of these books that came in and around that time that became cultural phenomena, right? That became instilled in public consciousness, and to, must remain ever vigilant. We must remain ever aware that these things could happen again, that there could be another Hitler type. We must be aware. And so these stories are perpetuated so that we're not allowed to forget the narratives that they installed and perpetuated of these so-called world wars and the whatever, ideas that we still believe to this day to be true about those events and the characters and the heroes and the villains involved. But we mustn't, let down our guard, even though the books and the films and the mythology created around these people essentially ensures that there will not be a rebellion, that ensures that there will not be an uprising. It ensures the passivity of would-be patriots and the like, right? Through these stories, through these enculturated ideas, through these narratives, through these popular books and films, through the perpetuation of certain narratives in the news, media, etc., through these massive movie franchises that get hearts and minds of generations attached and involved and believing in these stories about the heroes and the rebellions and the dissidents and all these things. It essentially defangs and disarms those who would ever potentially rise up against the machine, right? It's through that mind control and social programming and conditioning wherein the unconscious passivity is instilled and perpetuated and installed. And by repeating these narratives, by repeating the idea that these are good times, this is a golden era, this is a time of great prosperity and abundance, and we must protect it, while the whole time they're doing subtle and consistent and perpetual things to destroy the exact notions and fabrications and foundations of that very idea. They're destroying the family unit. They're destroying the stability and potentiality of perpetuating the human species without more technocracy, without more medical intervention, without more government surveillance and control. They're creating the very thing that they allegedly are warning us to always be vigilant and aware could happen. They are actually creating these things all along, even though, in our minds, in our hearts, in our consciousness, in our collective story, we are being pacified the whole time. Again, that is my whole intention with these things when I explore these chats and when I put forth these videos and these ideas about the philosophy and the principle and the underlying notions and ideas that we forget. We are cleverly, dissuaded to consider and question and interrogate, to defer to someone else, to defer to someone else's authority, to be entertained and to be dumbed down and stupefied and to be at the same time predictively programmed so that when events do play out, when these massive frauds and hoaxes and staged events do play out on the world stage, that we have already been pre-programmed into believing that it was inevitable, that it was bound to happen, that it was just around the corner at any moment, that there could be another terror attack, that there could be another pandemic, whatever it is. All these complete hoaxes and fictitious narratives and ideas, they're slowly over time inculcated into your mind, into your consciousness, into your reality distortion. And then, of course, when they play out and when the perpetrators make these events happen in real time, allegedly, at least in our mind, in our imagination, even though, they didn't actually happen how they were advertised and perpetrated, we've already accepted them to be a foregone conclusion. We've accepted that it was inevitable. See, we let down our guard. See, it happened, even though these are good times and we were prepared and we're spying on everyone, and empire is consistently spreading its influence around the world and killing millions in the process, destroying economies, doing regime changes, all the rest of it, to keep the West all high and mighty in perception only, to keep the West getting, cheap goods and resources and raw materials, and the absolute garbage that we buy, and the toys and the food that we throw out, and all these things, and the clothing that's covered in chemicals that's not good for us, constantly toxifying our hearts and minds and our bodies, right? We don't see the subtleties of this false narrative, false construct, this fake reality that's all around us, but we buy into the idea of empire and unconsciously consent to its marauding and murderous machinations all over the world that's just running rampant all over the planet, while we pretend that we've got struggles at home and that we have to pretend, as if even though nature provides everything we need, we pretend that we need more and more technocratic involvement. We need more tech, we need more AI, we need more whatever it is that government is saying this week that we need. We need more control of the climate agenda. We need more investment in these things. We need more and more billions for the AI solution that will save us from ourselves. So, of course, I'll link that chat below, which may be of interest to you. And there are ideas in there that can help to, open your eyes a little bit more, shift your perspective a little bit, resources, information, authors, and ideas that our mainstream narrative, that our Hollywood entities and studio systems actively subvert and hide and push to the fringe. There are people, who've offered films and books and ideas from outside that system to counter those narratives. And I think it's a good idea to partake and to take in some of these things and to give them a chance to remind ourselves that we're being played at every angle. We're being manipulated in every way at all times through our senses and our reality perception and our perspectives. So to look at some of these films and consider that, as usual, what we see in the mainstream, what's on offer, what's most popular, what's lasted, what keeps being reintroduced to the mainstream narrative is, rule of opposites again, as Matt McKinley would offer. Apply the rule of opposites, because generally what's going to be in the mainstream, what's most popular, what's most present, what keeps being recycled generation after generation as these, would-be dissident and rebel factions and, these voices that speak up against the tyranny and creeping totalitarianism and socialism and communism and all the rest. These people are, in fact, shills. They're placed there. They're installed. They're made popular. They're made, ever present. They're integrated into academia, into Hollywood, into the narrative manufacturing machine that is Western Empire today. And of course, it shows itself and manifests in different ways in other cultures, I'm certain, in the China, in the Russia, in the India, in Africa, in, everywhere else. There's different variations on a theme, because this is this one construct, this one system, it's one machine, it's one simulation, reality creation thing that persists through all of humanity across the entire realm. So don't think that you're escaping it by, moving to a different culture or a country. There's just, it's variations on a theme. And while others might be less parasitic, predatory perhaps, while other nations may still have some semblance of, traditional values or ideas that are humanist, human-centric, that are less out to feed off. That is human ingenuity, human creativity, human potential. Unlike in the West, that is fundamentally and systemically designed to be parasitic and predatory in nature, to be completely deceptive, and to be completely um, capturing and corrupting and distorting reality all around us. Even though we have everything we could possibly need from nature, we have more than enough space, natural resources, raw materials to live in the best possible way that we could ever have even conceived. Still, we have these negating factors. Still, we have these parasitic and predatory forces always at work, always coming up with new and different ways to just twist things around, to destabilize and to knock us off our paths, and to convince us and control us, and to predictively program us, right? So the important thing, as ever, is the principle. The underlying energy is to reclaim that authority, that agency, and to realize where we've been deferring and giving away that power, and subduing that spark, or allowing their stories to take over these narratives and to instill ideas into our minds, into our hearts, to control us. And as ever, don't necessarily believe anything I'm saying. Don't believe what comes through in these GPT discourses. It's just a beginning. It's a starting place. It's that first step in a new, potentially new story, a new direction for you. Take it for what it is, as an offering, as a concept, as an idea to challenge what I think many of us are always feeling underneath, to challenge those ideas that have always felt a little bit off, to really take another look at some of these ideas that we just accept as necessary and real and true, to really scrutinize and interrogate these cultural narratives, these powerful stories, these massive franchises that we love, and you know and integrate and project our ideals and needs and beliefs and paradigms onto the heroes in the stories, the rebels that are always standing up against the empire, and yet they never fix the system. It's just one page, one story that just, next generation, the empire has rebuilt itself. They've come at with another planet destroying weapon, whatever it might be. These metaphors used in like the Star Wars universe, right? The rebels rise up and take down and destroy one of their weapons, but there's another and another and another already being constructed somewhere else. So they're not solving anything. They're just playing into that story that's already been well defined and designed generations before they even thought about rising up and doing what they do as heroes, and fighting for the side of the light and fighting against the dark side, right? These are metaphors that persist throughout our entire cultural narrative across all of Earth, across all cultures. So we need to reclaim those archetypes and realize when we're being led by the nose into more deception and distortion and corruption. We need to wake up to the fact that we're giving away this power, and that we might be asleep at the wheel, and that's fine too. There's no judgment regardless. But if you feel like, maybe something's missing, that you could be getting a little bit more out of this life, then it's time to just step back from that story and start taking it apart and look where the cracks are, and poke it, break it wide open, let the light come through so you can see the transparency of these things. You can find the falsities and the fake ideas and notions that are controlling and confusing and corrupting your better knowing, your better nature, your true and organic and real human self. Take another look at it, and set aside the idea that these public and popular dissidents and rebels, those who are allegedly exposing the system, those who are allegedly prognosticating these end times, who are allegedly, on the side of good and on the side of exposing the darkness and the shadowy aspects of our empire, are very likely elements and agents of that very machine that we would be allegedly fighting against or wanting to expose for what it is. No big deal. We're all fooled. We're all foolish and ignorant and uneducated and unaware to a certain point. There's a forgetting that's endemic to this earth-bound life that's necessary for us to be able to find our ways and to experience and explore and experiment with different ways of experiencing and living a human life. So don't worry about judging yourself negatively or feeling like you've been taken for a ride, because we all have. And that's part of the human experience, the part of the reason we came here in the first place. Take that as just more information, more ideas, more concepts, more, filler for the grand story. Another way to contextualize why you are here. And don't judge yourself or anyone else in that matter, because we've all been purposely made to forget by our own choice, by our own decisions in some way, shape, or form. So realign with what's real and true simply by coming back to that which is natural, that which emanates from within, that original creative spark, as I've spoken about. And see through the story, see through the narratives, take back that agency so that you're not always led by the nose and so easily taken in by these narratives that defeat and dissuade you and defer you from pursuing what's real and true in your life and what is meaningful and purposeful in your life. Have a good one.
It's been coming down every other day, but they tell me we are in drought season. That's not my story, not my reality. No matter what you force my eyes to see, and the sky is falling right on top of me, but they tell me it's falling